Hello, everyone. My name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about God Help the Child, written by Toni Morrison. Now, before I go into summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Um, this work is very fascinating. It's very intense. There's a lot of scenes that are dark and gloomy and grim, because there's a lot of child molestation going on. There's a lot of violent accounts going on, and just there's racism depicted. There's a lot depicted in this book by Toni Morrison, and it focuses a lot on how our childhoods affect the adults that we become. So in this work, first and foremost, we're introduced to a mother and a father who are black individuals, but they're light skinned, and they give birth to a child, to a little girl by the name of Lula and Brideswell. They call her Midnight Dark, Midnight Black, and so she's extremely dark skinned, and her father believes that that's not her child, that's not his child. And they're living in an America where racism exists, where African Americans had to face racism and discrimination. And these two parents, who are both light skinned, they were expecting a child who was also light skinned, but they received this little girl who's so dark that it just ruins the relationship, and they end up splitting up. The mother keeps the child, but she thinks about getting rid of it. And the relationship between the parents and the child is just so dark and so lonely and sad, because the father leaves. The mother thought about giving up the child for adoption or abandoning the child. The mother doesn't abandon the child; she keeps the child. But she doesn't want to touch the child because the child is so dark. She doesn't want to love the child or take care of the child as she should. In fact, the mother makes Lula Ann call her Sweetness instead of mother or mom, so that when she's out in the street with her or in public with her, nobody will know that that's her child. So it's a very sad story. It's very sad to see parents and a parent treat a child like this. Bride Lula Ann, we're pretty much, I'm gonna call her Bride for the rest of this summary, because that's how we come to know her later within the novel. She chooses the name Bride and she sticks with that. So Bride is this kid that just had a rough childhood. Her mother didn't love her, her father didn't love her, or they didn't show her affections as they should have. And so her life is, kind of like, her life is heavy because, in of a way, she always wanted her parents to love her and her parents to show affection towards her. But she doesn't really get that growing up. And that affects her adult life and what becomes of her life. Now, so pretty much what happens next, we get an account within the novel of this teacher by the name of Sophia, who goes to prison for 15 years. She had an extremely long sentence, but she serves 15 years of it. And Lula Ann, Bride, is the child who put her there. Bride stood, was a witness, or, well, she lied about it. She wasn't really a witness. She never saw this teacher molesting any children or assaulting any children. It's just that, Bride is black and her mother is light skinned, and people wanted to kind of like get this woman, this teacher, this white individual behind bars, or this teacher behind bars, because, well, I guess it's just revenge, overcoming something, because Bride only did it or testified against this woman because she wanted her mother's affection, and everybody warmed up to Bride because she's this black girl standing up to, I guess, American racism and discrimination. So after the trial, after this woman gets accused of child molestation, and loses her job, goes to prison. Bride's life continues with her mother. I mean, I guess her mother shows her a little bit more affection after everything goes down, but not really. Her mother still doesn't want to touch her or want to show any affection. Her mother is really hard on her, especially when she starts to grow up. Her mother is in a way cruel. She's not like beating her bloody, but she's not really showing her love as a mother. The love and affection that a mother should show a child, Bride doesn't get that. She doesn't get that at all. So the story goes on, and Bride grows up. She actually becomes very successful. She works for a cosmetic company, even though she has dark skin and she doesn't use cosmetic herself. She wears a lot of white because somebody says that the white will bring out the blackness in her. So Bride wears a lot of white. Her mother, she splits away from her mother. She sends her mother money within the novel, but she never really goes ever to see the mother. So after Bride grows up and she becomes successful, I mean, she's driving around in a Jaguar within the novel. So Bride really becomes successful, and she doesn't share that wealth with her mother because her mother didn't really want her. And when she gets that separation from her mother, she doesn't ever look back. And when time passes and, times change in America, and, African Americans are doing better, are getting jobs, or becoming, black people of Bride's complexion, of dark complexion, are showing up on TV, are being featured in society, on newspapers, and all types of media. And times change and years go by, and black people enter mainstream society. Bride's mother, she starts to regret and starts to think about Bride's childhood and how she treated her cruel. How she was cruel towards her and how she maybe could have done things better. But she says it's not her fault a lot that Bride was so black. And she shouldn't have to pay for this. She thinks about like Bride visiting her and things like that, but Bride never does. Bride just goes off on her own, and she has to face all of her demons. We see Bride when Sophia gets released from prison. We see Bride kind of like trying to make amends and trying to, I guess, make Sophia's life better because she lied on the stand. So Bride tries to give her money, tries to give her cosmetics, tries to give her, something to start off her life, and Sophia pretty much beats her up badly, ruins her face to the point where she needs plastic surgery. Bride gets plastic surgery, but she doesn't call the police on Sophia. Sophia thought the police were going to come and get her because she's newly released. She's not. Any small thing could send her back to being incarcerated. So, Sophia thought she was going to go back, but Bride doesn't call the police. She just says somebody tried to rape her. And life goes on. And within the book, we find that Bride has this one friend by the name of Brooklyn. Brooklyn is Bride's friend. She's there for Bride a lot, but at the same time, she uses Bride to climb the ranks of success because after getting beaten and plastic surgery on her face, the work that Sophia did on Bride, Bride took a leave of absence from the company, and Brooklyn fills in for her, and Brooklyn climbs the ranks of success while Bride kind of finds herself. So the story goes. It's very interesting because I would say that we see different perspectives throughout the novel. There are parts where Bride is narrating, where her mother is narrating, where Sophia narrates, where different people, even Booker, this boyfriend of Bride, narrates. So we see different perspectives, and that's very fascinating because usually when you're reading a novel, you usually get one perspective from one omniscient narrator that tells you everything, but in this book we're getting different perspectives from different people and life stories from different people, so that's very fascinating. So Bride, she gets a boyfriend, and the boyfriend, for her and her boyfriend, it was all about sex and just how great it felt for them, and their experience together. They didn't pry into each other's lives, they didn't ask each other questions, but both of them were facing their demons. We get an account of Booker Bride's boyfriend's life and where he comes from. And what we learn is that his brother Adam was killed by a molester. He was raped, and his body was left. His body was left naked, so the body had no pants or shoes on, and just a t-shirt on. The body was, it rotted away, and the molester is a known serial molester, I guess, or serial killer too, and he is known for raping a bunch of boys. This is a very tough book to get through. A lot of sad things and a lot of dark things take place. And there's like for instance, the landlord of Sweetness and Bride's apartment complex. The landlord is seen raping a young boy, and Bride pretty much holds her mouth shut because they didn't want to lose their apartment. And that's what's terrifying, because, although this is a book, although these are characters, reality is shaped like that. Things like this do take place. People keeping their mouth shut so that they don't get persecuted. Young kids facing horrors like this. It exists around the world, and people have to face it. It's not just literature and a story being told in a book. These are things that do happen, even though this woman is talking about, this novel is talking about racism and discrimination and sexual violence and molestation. These are things that do take place in the world. And it's very sad when you actually read about it and you read about these characters that are going through it. So the story goes on. We get an account of Booker's life, that his brother died. And pretty much the police just don't really care, because it's just another black kid. Who cares? That's the sense you get from the book, and especially with the time that the time period within the novel, you could see that black people were still struggling within the eyes of it's the society that a lot of African Americans lived in. So the story goes on. We hear a lot about Booker's life and what went on within it. He got a bachelor's degree. He got a master's degree. He tried to understand discrimination and racism, and how all the world's horrors and griefs and sorrows actually come from money. Money is the source of all problems, because everybody wants it, and a lot of people are willing to do whatever it takes to get it. Booker is this kind of like college student, individual that's trying to find himself, trying to define himself, trying to understand the world, his place in it, and what he's going to do with his life. So he has a lot of things on his mind, a lot of things he's thinking about. Him and Bride, they kind of they like each other, they're with each other. And from my perspective, I think they do love each other. But they're both facing their demons. I think Booker wears the death of his brother Adam on his sleeves, and he's just kind of always thinking about Adam, what his life would have been if he didn't die by the hand of a molester, that kind of blocks his own life from advancing too. And the thing is, Bride is always thinking about Sophia, this woman that she puts away, and she lied on the stand, and she didn't really mean it, and she did it because she was selfish, and she just wanted her mother's love. Now, that is selfish that she did that, but at the same time, you understand this girl is coming from a household where she got no love, and she was really willing to do anything to get some affection from her mother. So these people, a lot of individuals we meet within this book, they're in a way, they're all broken, I would say, or not broken. I would say they all, kind of like all humans. I think we all have our demons and our darkness and things that we have to deal with throughout our lives. And Bride has, her demons in terms of people not loving her, people not wanting her, people kicking her out, people discriminating against her, people judging her because of her color, because of her race. There's a lot of pain and a lot of hurt behind these individuals. And I think that's something that exists for all human beings. There are pains and darknesses that we all face and go through, and they all have an effect on our lives and the things that we do. So Booker and Bride, they eventually broke up because yes, they were having great sex and they were having love. Well, not love or great lust, I guess. Um, but then they were not getting close. They were not close in terms of emotions. In terms like they were walking on eggshells. They wanted the relationship to last, but as long as it didn't get too deep. That's why they stayed away from each other's. Um, you know, I guess they didn't confront each other's demons. They break up, and Booker says to Bride that you're not the one for me. Bride pretty much has like a mental breakdown. And then later in the novel, we see Bride literally go out to find Booker, and that journey was very difficult and very hard. Her Jaguar got totaled. She meets a girl by the name of Rain and a character by the name of Steve and Evelyn. When her car gets totaled, she breaks. She needs to be nursed. Her leg gets broken. She needs to be nursed. Her car gets fixed eventually. Her legs get better or healed, and she goes back off to find Booker. But also, in terms of these characters, Evelyn and Steve and Rain, Stephen and Evelyn, they're a very interesting couple. They actually took in Rain by force. Rain was this abandoned kid who also had a history of sexual violence or molestation because her mother was, allowing men to pay her for them to have a time with Rain, and the man tried to abuse her, and she bit his stuff, if you know what I'm talking about. And Rain was pretty much on the street, and then Steve and Evelyn came and took her in and pretty much raised her. So a lot of the kids in this book, they just have these dark pasts and dark histories, and everyone has these darknesses and things that they're going through. And Rain and Bride, they actually do spend some time and confide in each other for a bit, and then Bride is on her way again. And it's a very tough story to hear these stories, and to hear what these people go through. And then eventually, Bride meets Queen, who is Booker's aunt. She has a conversation with her. Queen had a lot of stuff that had to do with Bride and Booker's relationship. She reunites them two, then plays referee between them two. Bride actually, beats up Booker, and she's like, why did you leave me? We were good together and all that kind of stuff. And Booker was like, well, this and this and that and the third. And they both kind of like, for a second, they confronted each other. They revealed the truth to each other. Bride says, this is what I did. This is, I sent this woman away. That's why I was obsessed with this woman, because throughout the book and throughout their relationship, Bride was always obsessed with Sophia and what she did to Sophia. She felt that regret and that, her conscience, bothered her. And she never told Booker why she was, looking up and researching and even helping out this child molester. And we know Booker has a history because a child molester killed his brother. So he was like, why is this woman that I'm with trying to help out a child molester? And they reveal each other's truths to each other. Bride says, she's not really a child molester. I never saw her do anything. I just lied. I just lied about it on the stand so that, my mother could love me. And I guess Booker understands that better. Booker, kind of like his pain about his brother dying by the hands of a child molester kind of gets relieved a little bit. And he opens up himself to Bride. And then at the end of the novel, Bride reveals that she's pregnant. And they kind of agreed that they're going to spend their lives together. And there's no talk about marriage or anything like that, but we're getting an account that moving forward, they're going to be together, and they're going to raise this new kid together. And then the book really ends with Bride's mother coming back into the picture, and kind of like saying, God help the child, because Bride doesn't really know how hard it is to raise a child. and the certain things that you have to do to raise a child, to make sure the child grows up, to make sure the child has a future. And it's not that easy to raise a child, especially if you've never been a parent. You know what pains and heartaches and things you have to survive to raise a child. And you know, Bride's mother is facing her own pain because she's pretty much, the world has changed. Black people are you know, entering mainstream society. She's in a nursing home by herself. Her daughter never visits her. She has no family members. The only thing that she gets from Bride is money from time to time. And you know, she's grateful because of the money, but at the same time, she now realizes that she's alone and she has no one, and she probably will never meet her grandchildren. Because of how badly she treated Bride when, you know, Bride was growing up. And I mean, you can't really blame Bride because her own mother hated her because of her skin color, and there was never true affection there. So even though that her mother's sweetness, like, wants to maybe get closer to Bride, it's too late because, I mean, Bride's moved on. Bride's closed that chapter, and that's very fascinating because, I mean, parents and kids, there's supposed to be a great bond there, but it's a bond that's supposed to be built. If a parent or the child ruins that bond and breaks that bond and cuts it, shreds it up, it might be hard to ever rebuild that. And if you and your child go separate ways, you know, you might be the one left regretting, because the older you get, the more lonely you're going to get, and your child might just forget about you and just complete their, because every child has an obligation to somewhat, has an obligation to take care of the parent. And most children, what they do is give their parents money and then that's it. But a lot of parents want more than that. They want, you know, that closeness, that togetherness, that, you know, spending time with their child. But if you break the bonds, if you didn't show your child affection when they were young, it's going to be hard for them, you know, to show you affection when the time passes. So in terms of analysis, in terms of deeper meaning, this book is very tough. I think it really makes you think about childhoods and how childhoods shape us. Throughout the book, I mean, there's several things going on with Bride. There are places where she's describing her body, and there's places where she loses her breasts and she loses the pubic hair on her body and her armpit hair, and her body just transforms and she becomes a tomboy in a way. And then there's times where her body just comes back to normal and she's a full curvy woman. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with the way that she sees herself and her psychology and just, you know, where she is mentally. She says it's because that Booker left her, that's why her body changed. And then when she gets reunited with Booker at the end of the book, her body's back to being a full-blown woman. There's a lot to say about her, you know, the way that, where she is mentally. I mean, this is a woman that's gone through a lot. She's a very dark-skinned woman. Again, midnight black, they said. She's faced a lot of discrimination. I think she probably faced more discrimination than the average black woman because she's so dark. Wherever she goes, she's just noticeable. And she's wearing white clothes all the time. So she's very conscious about how she looks. And also, she works in a cosmetic company. So she works in everything that's about her is how you look, how you present yourself to other people. She drives a Jaguar. So there's a lot of painting a picture for society to see. But internally, Bride is facing a lot of problems because her mother never loved her. Her father abandoned her. Booker left her in the book. Sophia, when she tried to help out Sophia beat her and messed up her face. So this is a woman, no matter what she did, no matter how she tried to, you know, change the world for herself, she was always this outcast. She was always left out. She was always neglected, unloved. And it ultimately had an effect on her psyche. I mean, yes, her story ends well. She gets the man that she loves. She has a child on the way, and you know, she's split away from her mother. But those things about society and people shunning her, those will never go away, and they will always affect her because she really cares about what people think about her, and there's everyone around her seems to be using her. I mean, even Brooklyn, who's this wonderful friend coming to her aid at every turn, Brooklyn ultimately uses her to get a leg up in the cosmetic company. So no one's really altruistic towards Bride. Um, there's a lot to look at that and just see her life. Booker, I mean, Booker opens up himself. It seems like the death of his brother really had a hard, just a heaviness on his life. He had quarrels with his family, with his father. It's the death of his brother is something that just impacted his life to the point where he didn't know what to do with his own life. Um, it just bothered him to the point where he had to split up with Bride, and he had to think about his life. It affected him in college, in grad school, everywhere he went, to the point where it came to the point where if he didn't stop thinking about his brother and what that meant to him, he probably would have ruined his life, and his life would have ended up in a bad place. So the characters are very fascinating, and also I guess another interesting thing about this book is just how all these molesters and all these horrific scenes of children being abused is just unnerving. And in a way, the book is kind of saying a person's childhood is ultimately what allows them to be either monsters or good individuals. Bride was very strong. Her life ended up well, but at the same time, you saw people made bad choices within the novel, just determined on where they came from, how their mindsets were shaped, and we saw the line from childhood to adulthood, and how certain experiences can guide people's decisions within their adulthoods. So there's a lot going on here. We see like how neglect and lack of intimacy and discrimination, racism, how it can affect people, how it can isolate people. Sweetness life. I mean, she didn't like her daughter. She didn't like her daughter's color, and when she's older, she recognizes the error of her ways, but it's too late, and she's all alone in the world. I mean, she has her nursing home friends to keep her company, but she has truly no one to love her, and she's the one that caused that because she never showed her daughter true love. So there's a lot to take in here. There's a lot to take in about these characters and what happens to them. Yeah, I mean the children. God help help the child. It's very fascinating because all these individuals were children at some point, and children are so powerless in the world, and it's really, it's really by chance if they're not scarred or broken for life, because the certain experiences that they have, usually the experiences that you have as a child, depending on how your childhood was, you could be, by the time you reach adulthood, if you had a bad childhood, by the time you reach adulthood, you could either be a broken adult, a successful adult, a well-raised adult, or you could be dead and killed and just darkened to the point where there's no rescue. And I guess the greatest example of that is the character Rain, because Rain, her mother was probably the most terrible mother within this novel, because Rain's mother, she was literally pimping her out, using her as a prostitute for men. Men were paying to get access to her daughter, and she kicked out her daughter when her daughter wasn't, prepared to do that for the mother, and then she lived on the street as a child. Rain is rescued by Steve and Evelyn, but she is scarred for life. And I think the joys of being a child, the joys of being carefree, because honestly, the best time to live, the best time to exist as a human being is as a child. That's when you're not thinking about the plight of the world, the plight of societies, the horrific and, you know, the horrific and dark things that take place in the world. As a child, your only job is to have fun, eat, go to school, and just be a kid. But as soon as you step into adulthood, you see the world for what it is. You see the darkness within it. You see what other adults do to other adults, and what certain adults do to children. And when you're a child, you're ignorant of the world around you and the realities around you. But when you're an adult, you have a front row seat to all of it. But Rain, she's literally pushed into reality before she could literally even walk, because, you know, her mother was using her to make money, and allowing her to be molested. So, you know, this book, it has its dark turns, but ultimately I think it really shows us how important a childhood is, and the problems that can, the good things and bad things that can, you know, come out of it, when you're an adult. But that's all I had to say about this book. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.